Zechariah 2 is a vision-filled chapter rich in symbolism and prophetic imagery, illustrating God's promises to restore Jerusalem and protect His people. The chapter is primarily composed of a vision, a prophecy of restoration, and a call to rejoice in God's presence. Here is a verse-by-verse commentary on this chapter. Verse 1, I lifted up mine eyes again, and looked, and behold a man with a measuring line in his hand. Zechariah sees a man with a measuring line, representing God's intention to measure and define Jerusalem's boundaries. Measuring is often symbolic of preparation, purpose, and order. In this context, it signifies God's plans to rebuild and bless Jerusalem. Verse 2, Then said I, Whither goest thou? And he said unto me, To measure Jerusalem, to see what is the breadth thereof, and what is the length thereof. The man's task is clarified, he is to measure the city's breadth and length. This emphasizes the city's growth and expansion, foreshadowing a time when Jerusalem will be restored and its boundaries expanded. It also indicates God's careful attention to His people's spiritual and physical renewal. Verse 3, And, behold, the angel that talked with me went forth, and another angel went out to meet him. The vision intensifies with the arrival of another angel. This second angel's role is to bring further clarity to Zechariah, signifying that God has more to reveal. The interaction between the angels shows the spiritual involvement in guiding and protecting God's people. Verse 4, And said unto him, Run, speak to this young man, saying, Jerusalem shall be inhabited as towns without walls for the multitude of men and cattle therein. The angel declares that Jerusalem will overflow with people and animals, symbolizing abundance, blessing, and prosperity. The phrase without walls is significant. It implies that the city will be so prosperous that it cannot be contained. In ancient times, cities depended on walls for defense. Here, however, God promises a security that surpasses physical boundaries. Verse 5, For I, saith the Lord, will be unto her a wall of fire round about, and will be the glory in the midst of her. God promises to be a wall of fire around Jerusalem, providing divine protection and security. Fire often represents God's presence and power, example the burning bush in Exodus. Not only will God protect Jerusalem from outside threats, but He will also dwell within her, filling the city with His glory. Verse 6, Ho, ho, come forth, and flee from the land of the north, saith the Lord, for I have spread you abroad as the four winds of the heaven, saith the Lord. This is a call for the exiles to return to Jerusalem from the lands to which they were scattered. The land of the north primarily refers to Babylon, where many Jews were exiled. God's promise to regather His people from the four corners of the earth highlights His faithfulness to fulfill His promises. Verse 7, Deliver thyself, O Zion, that dwellest with the daughter of Babylon. The verse calls for the Jewish people still in Babylon to leave and return to Zion. This is not only a physical return but also a spiritual one, away from Babylonian influence and back to the place where they can worship God freely. It's a reminder of their distinct identity as God's chosen people. Verse 8, For thus saith the Lord of hosts, after the glory hath He sent me unto the nations which spoiled you, for he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of His eye. God speaks of sending judgment upon the nations that harmed Israel. The phrase apple of his eye shows God's intimate care and affection for his people, portraying them as precious and protected. Any harm against Israel is taken personally by God, and he promises justice for their suffering. Verse 9, For, behold, I will shake mine hand upon them, and they shall be a spoil to their servants, and ye shall know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me. This verse emphasizes God's active role in bringing justice. By shaking his hand, he will assert his power over Israel's enemies, bringing retribution. The oppressed will see their oppressors fall, and this act will serve as evidence of God's sovereignty and protection. Verse 10, Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for, lo, I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, saith the Lord. A declaration of joy and encouragement. God's promise to dwell among his people is fulfilled in part with the rebuilding of Jerusalem and later more fully in Christ's coming. This call to rejoice emphasizes the hope and joy of God's presence. Verse 11, And many nations shall be joined to the Lord in that day, and shall be my people, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts hath sent me unto thee. God's promise extends beyond Israel. Many nations will come to know and worship him. This is a prophecy of the future inclusion of the Gentiles in God's kingdom, a theme that is fully realized in the New Testament through Christ. God's dwelling among his people will be assigned to the nations of his presence and power. Verse 12, And the Lord shall inherit Judah his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. God's choice of Jerusalem as his inheritance signifies his special covenant relationship with his people. This promise underscores his unwavering commitment to Judah and Jerusalem as his chosen, holy city. Verse 13, Be silent, O all flesh, before the Lord, for he is raised up out of his holy habitation. The chapter closes with a call to reverence and awe before God, who is stirring to act on behalf of his people. God's holy habitation suggests his heavenly throne, from which he moves to fulfill his promises. This verse emphasizes the majesty of God and his ultimate authority. Conclusion. Zechariah 2 is a profound message of hope, restoration, and divine protection. It shows God as both a protector and provider for his people, promising to regather, defend, and dwell among them. This chapter also foreshadows the coming inclusion of all nations into God's family, showing that his ultimate plan transcends borders and invites all to share in his blessings. The chapter calls us to reflect on God's faithfulness, his active presence, and the hope he offers for restoration and peace.